join Supervisor Pyle in the pledge to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty God, we pray this day for your ever-enduring guidance. Cloak us in wisdom and fortitude that we may disperse our knowledge and facts intelligently among all humanity of whom we serve. Amen. We move on to item B1, and that would be announcement of items discussed in closed session. Mr. Nichols or Retta, either one, please.
Comments of legal counsel, 2 cases, no reportable action. Conference of real property negotiation regarding the RFP for the Herlon. We have it recommends direct staff to work with the highest proponent, which is Pizzullo and Smith, for sales agreement documents, and to bring it back on the agenda for a vote in the future. And we'll have to continue closed session for later to finish out the remaining items.
Thank you very much. We move on to item B2, and I have a request from Eileen Spencer, and Eileen, I appreciate the yellow highlight, by the way.
Thank you. I thought I would know.
So, if you don't mind, would you address the board on B2, please? And then we'll take it up after you have your comments.
I don't know how many are there. Maybe I'll just give you all of them.
Early last week, I put in a written request to have an agenda item submitted to Bob Pyle, and not only did he ignore it, but I received no response back from Mr. Pyle asking that an agenda item be added. You might want to look at that, Jeff.
Yeah, I have one copy here.
Oh, okay, those are extras.
These are extra copies, if you'd like them back.
No.
Okay. Those are extra copies, I have one.
So we're asking, County Health is asking again to add an agenda item today for discussion only. There is no apparent parity in your salaries. Mr. Wozik and Mr. Alba are making less than you. The way you look at it, you're one of us. You come from one of 5 districts, and you weren't hired, you were elected. And we feel that even though you each represent a little under 5,000 constituents each, you do represent collectively the entire county, and we feel that you all should be earning the same amount of money. So we would like this added to the agenda for discussion only. We have other handouts that we can, if we're able to discuss it today, we will hand this out also in a proposal for a new amendment that would allow parity and transparency to your salaries. Again, I don't think, Jack, you should be making more money than Mr. Wozik. You should all be making the same amount of money.
I know we're not supposed to engage.
No, you're not. So I would like you to consider...
Well, I'm sorry. No, wait a minute. Eileen, I'm sorry. I am the chair, and I'm going to take the floor for a moment. You made the statement based on your figures here. I'm making more than Larry. I'm sorry.
Those are public records that came from the auditor, and you
Yes.
are making more money. Oh, no,
Name's
this is our
correct?
proposal. This is our proposal. At the last meeting, I showed you
Oh,
the
I'm sorry.
disparity. This is what we want to do.
I
We
see.
want you all to make the same money.
I see it up there. Thank you.
Okay,
For the clarification.
that's all. We want it on the agenda today. You can, if you don't want anybody to listen to it, you can put it as the last item before closed session. But we would like a discussion on this because Mr. Wozik made a good point last week. We want to attract people. We want a salary and benefit package to attract people to run for this office. And we can do that by showing that each of you make the same pay. And so we would like it, if you do put it on the agenda, we do have a written proposal on how to do that. And it doesn't mean giving any money back, doesn't mean anything except bringing all your pay up to the same amount.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead then and take up item B2, agenda approval, additions and deletions. You've heard Ms. Spencer's request as well, so.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that we add Ned Porter to the list of journeyman memory of.
Thank you, I agree, and that was my list too. Porter was a good friend for many years. Is there anything else on the agenda? Staff, you have any changes? Chair, to entertain a motion? Been moved by Supervisor Wasik, seconded by Supervisor Pyle to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any further discussion on the matter? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Chair votes aye. Is there any opposition to that? Carries unanimously. We're going to move on then to item B3, public comment. As was stated earlier during our meeting, this item is placed on the agenda for those in the audience to address the board on items which do not necessarily appear on our agenda, however, do fall under the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors. We retain as chair, I retain the ability to issue a 3-minute time limit to presentations made during this item, and we'd be happy to take your comments. So if there's anybody in the audience wishing to address the board, I do have one request, and that would be from Eileen Spencer. Eileen, would you like to go first? You're the only written request that I have.
Okay.
So.
We will be bringing back this issue every week, and we will have a larger presentation next week until you realize that what you're doing is unfair. And it brings up, which has been discussed this last 2 weeks, term limits might be the answer to this. If you're not willing to be fair, then we are talking about starting an initiative for term limits. There's no reason why you can't all be paid the same. There's just no reason. A second reason is that I've been coming to these meetings for several months now, and you do have, I think, a civility rule.
Mm-hmm.
And I think while Violet Stout is a novelty, she uses profanity almost every time she speaks. And I think that if no one corrects her, I know if I use the type of language that she does, that it'd be headlines in the newspaper. So I'm asking you that to curtail her profanity, and if there are other people here that are offended by her profanity. And I ask that you invoke some type of preventative, in other words, when she does it, say you can't do that, please leave. Last week she told me to get out of the building, and I don't think she owns the building, and used profanity with me during the thing. So I'm just asking you to invoke the civility thing. I don't think anybody has the right to use her or what type of language she's allowed to do. So that was all.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to address the board on items which do not necessarily appear on the agenda? Be happy to take your comments at this time. Violet,
Am I allowed to speak?
you're allowed to speak. You're recognized.
I own this building, and I think people know that. I pay taxes here. There's a rumpus going on, and I went through some of my papers, and you know the spotted owl? You've heard that all come up again? And I don't know if you guys are in on this or not, but that spotted owl was made, what do you call it? Endangered species back in 1990 and 91. And that was all settled. And I had plenty of fights with the government over this. But that's why they cut the mill out, that's why they cut the trees out, cutting trees. And the spotted owl lives on the coast, in the caves. He don't belong here at all. And I have a big long poem I started to bring it, but I figured I'd be condemned for it. So I want you guys to know that spotted owl has already been endangered years ago, and it don't live here. So I want you to know that. And anybody that wants any information, ask Lila, because I know everything.
Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience wishing to address the board under the public comment portion of our deliberation? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move on then to item D1, which is unagendized reports by board members. And I guess it's always tough whether to figure out to start on my left or my right. Supervisor Wasik, how about you? You want to kick it off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just that I went, I had a nice hour and a half or so at the Pennies for the Pool deal with Supervisor Chapman and some of the city council members, and it was really nice to participate, and real pleased that things are gaining speed at the pool, and I look forward to being a part of it, and I'm sure we all do. Yeah, it's just really good to see that that's going in the right direction with some steam behind it. So yeah, thank you for Jim for working with Brian, and yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wasik. That it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Pyle?
Yeah, just one thing for the record, I would like to say that Mrs. Spencer has never asked me never requested me to put an item on the agenda.
Would you like me to produce evidence, Mr. Pyle?
I've never seen nothing.
Well, we're
No,
not
not
going
gonna-
to engage in any kind
Yeah,
of.
show the evidence because I haven't seen it.
I will, sir.
That-
I'm done.
Supervisor Alba?
No report.
Supervisor Chapman?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Got a few things. We experience a lot of negative stories. It seems that's the focus of most input, but I have a few happy stories I think I want to share with the board, and kind of do them in kind of a progressive order. We talk about our recreation tourism economy as being kind of the new economy. That's what our new plan calls for. It was adopted last year, but it's been kind of out there for a long time. And here just recently, one of our newest businesses in town received some attention. And I never really heard of this magazine before. It's a travel magazine called The Far. It's kind of a upscale. I guess maybe that's the reason why I've never heard of it, because most of my travel is not very upscale. These guys deal stuff around the world. And in their August-September issue, they're actually based in San Francisco. They have a very nice publication. I mean, it's done very well. And they have the 2013 Guide to Exceptional Travel Experiences, which now that my wife's retired, I'm sure that she's discovered this magazine. She's going to be constantly monitoring it, thinking of new places for us to go. So hopefully we'll check some of this stuff out. But what is really unique and why it's significant, I think, to our community is they have, starting on page 81 of the issue, is 55 places to go, exceptional travel experiences, drink, eat, shop, to do. And so there's 55 spots around the world in different categories. And in the first category, they talk about 10 drinking experiences. And they have Times Square's Last Dive Bar is featured, and then they have people, these are travel people suggesting. Cafe de Monde in Detroit is on the list. Pouring Ribbons in New York is on the list. Zetter Townhouse in London is on the list. The Avery in Chicago is on the list. And Silencio in Paris is on the list. And Bar Agricole in San Francisco is on the list. Hiram Bingham Train in Peru is on the list. That's assuming you're going to Machu Picchu and you get this Pisco Sour on the Oriental Express train. So these are the kind of things they're talking about. The Tiki Bar in Maui, and some of you probably been to Hawaii, been to this particular place. But the next one, and last one on this list, is Lasen Ale Works in Susan. So anyway, FAR.com member Jenny Fitzgerald put it this way: a great brew house and a restaurant where there are none. And it says, give us your pour. There are places where, thanks to the setting, the bartender, or the ingredients, the drink is an experience unto itself. Add these to your bucket list. So I think it's significant that we have amongst our community here, they have pictures of these 10 places, and here's the Pioneer. And those of you, like myself, who spend a lot of time going there for something to eat or to hang out or to visit, it's been an outstanding place for the community. But more importantly, it's reached that kind of notoriety in just a little over a year. And it speaks to the issue of the recreation tourism as we see our trail system develop. We see the recreation opportunities around us. We're going to get some rain and see Eagle Lake bounce back. The snow sports that are available in the wintertime. My wife and I just got back from spending Saturday at Lasen Park. It's always a lot of fun to go there, and it's right in our own backyard, and I'm amazed at the amount of, you couldn't have found a parking place within a mile of Bumpus Hill trailhead. They were parked along the roads in both directions. That just shows you how busy the place is. They were kind of with the night sky thing going on with Perseus meteor showers. I think a lot of people were in the park because of that. But we have a lot of things around us. But I think you have to have attractions, and I think having this kind of publicity for them, and I think the board should take notice of it. And I'm going to work with Eric and Margaret, and maybe we could do something to suitably recognize them for they've been in business a little over a year, and they're expanding and growing. And I just found that was such a great story. And to follow up on that, Joel, our trails guy that's back with us, shared with me earlier this week an editorial that's in the Durango Herald, and I made copies. And it kind of speaks about how, as a community, when you just small amounts of investments that are made in the infrastructure. In this case, they were, Durango was already kind of world class and known for mountain biking and other recreation activities that they do. Several places in Colorado are like that, but they just added a new section of trail, and they talk about it in terms of the impacts on, let me pass these over to the staff, in terms of the just how the small investments can have a major impact in terms of the community and the economy and so forth. And this editorial kind of speaks to that. And given what we just recently have done with the Southside Trail and the support the board has given staff and the BLM and the partnership we have with BLM, and recently Mr. Nichols and I and some others met with the Forest Service folks, and we're getting them engaged to talk about the development of the Fredonia Summit trails that would come down, and basically from Fredonia Summit over to the Biz Johnson Trail there at Gomez, but then back to Devil's Corral, creating some single track trails that could tie into, at that point, the Southside Trail there and the Biz coming back into town. That as we see these things evolve and develop, what they talk about in this editorial in Durango, that other communities are experiencing, are going to increase in a magnitude that is exponential. And so I think we have the ability, and with a cool place like Lasen Ale Works, when you're done, to go to, I think that we do have some good things to celebrate. The last thing I'd like to also share with the board, and you've already seen, if you've seen the newspaper, it's already on the front page of the newspaper, and here's some extra copies for staff. But a few weeks ago, I was approached by Councilman Brian Wilson from the City Council, and we've been having ongoing discussions now for several weeks, and we've kind of worked with our respective administrators, and I appreciate Mr. Nichols' support and cooperation. And we come up with a proposal which obviously is not on the agenda. We can talk about it today, but I'd like to ask that this be placed on next week's agenda so we can have a board discussion and invite the community's input as well to talk about a new pool construction. It's kind of a novel concept. We've had a lot of studies that have been done over the last 8 to 10 years to deal with the pool situation. And I know Mr. Nichols' committee that he convened last year has been kind of working on with the idea of going to a vote of the people at some point next year. The point is that every time you turn around, that question continually comes up, is when are we going to get a pool? And waiting for an election and going through all that process, we'd be lucky if we see something in the next 5 years. And so with the resources we have and the budgets we have, this proposal is basic and simple. And just as we have done so many times with other issues, we have like with our solid waste, with transportation, with air resources, we formed JPAs, and it's been a successful model, with the city and the county coming together, and this would kind of mirror that same concept. It would put some basic resources into the pot on an annual basis that JPA could work with. The amount of money, I realize that we have varying amounts of projections as to what our budget deficits are going to be. It's a question of priority, and as I indicated with one of our elected departments that we like to argue with is, we roughly have a $100 million budget, and we're talking about a $200,000 allocation out of that budget. That would be, of course, that $100 million includes all the specialized, categorized, monies that are dedicated can only be used for specific purposes. But give us the $200,000 and let the bureaucracy and all the special programs that are out there and all the dedicated categorical programs worry about how to make it work with the remaining $99,800,000. But let's take care of probably the single most uniformly defined need that the community has, and this is an opportunity for us to do it. And what I'd like to see on the agenda is, with the county budget coming up for consideration in the next few weeks, at one point Mr. Nichols had kind of encouraged me to maybe take this up after the budget, and that maybe is one way to do it, but I think this needs to be part of the budget, and that's why we bring it forward now. But at the same time, as part of that agenda item, we need to also look at going through the steps that would be necessary to form the Joint Powers Authority, and it's twofold. You have to create that entity, and then once we get the entity created, then create the fiscal component to back it up. And so that's what this proposal is about, and I would like to have the board, if we could talk about it. If we have maybe a time certain, I'm sure there'll be a number of folks who will be interested in that discussion with the board with that.
Sure.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
And staff, you got that? We'll go ahead and place it on the agenda for next week. In the interest of time, I'll make mine real short. We had LAFCO yesterday. Supervisor Chapman and I attended, and we did the Westwood and Clear Creek MSRs and the Sphere, and obviously no change in the Sphere. So everything went very well, I think. Westwood was
The only
represented.
main thing is we
Yes.
had to update, to tag on your report is,
Go ahead.
we had to
Oh, the
update,
Meyer.
and update the membership on the various community service district boards. The information John had in his report was a little bit outdated, so other than that.
And we're still talking about the ambulance and hospital districts and so on up in their areas. We'll update on that. Thank you, Supervisor Chapman, for helping me out on that. Yeah, we're going to move on then to item D2. D2 is time certain, 10 o'clock. Sheriff Groudon. Good morning, Dean.
Morning.
Local impacts of court-ordered prison releases.
All right, so Dean Groudon, Sheriff.
You're going to do this in 15 minutes?
Oh, it'll be less than that, I hope. And I've got my undersheriff, John Mino, here with me. Obviously, everyone's aware that the three-judge panel ordered the state of California to reduce their prison populations so they could more adequately meet the offenders' medical and mental health needs. And then on August 2nd, the U.S. Supreme Court refused to stop the ordered release of nearly 10,000 California prison inmates. That ordered release would get them to the population levels that the three-judge panel ordered. The governor's office currently is working on other options to reduce prison populations, including contracting with counties, private facilities, and continuing to house offenders out of state. So they're trying they don't want to release those 10,000 offenders, so they're trying to look at other options currently. The administration's plan did include moving additional offenders out of state. That was the plan, but the State Sheriff's Association, we've been in contact with the Secretary of Corrections office and the governor's office trying to work with them related to this issue. And that was part of the original plan, was to ship additional offenders out of state. Well, last week, the California Attorney General submitted a request to the three-judge panel requesting clarification, because they told the governor he could do what he needed to reduce those populations, because there are issues with appropriation of funding for additional contracts within the state. There are legislative issues related to early release and so on. But in their response, they said that he can continue to house offenders out of state, but he can't move additional offenders out of state. So that's going to be somewhat of a hiccup in the initial plan that we heard. So basically, but in their response to the Attorney General's request, they did clarify that he does have the authority to contract additional beds within the state. He does have the authority to release frail or elderly offenders and start to release low-risk, what they call low-risk offenders. So the deadline for this is the end of this year currently. Now, again, they're trying not to release anybody, but in the end, I think that some number of inmates is going to get released. I don't think they'll be able to accommodate all those offenders or